rain started like someone had opened a faucet above the sky and left it running. It was that kind of hard, steady rain that turns highways into mirrors and makes the world feel like it's been swallowed whole. I didn't think much of it at first. I've driven through worse. I had a late shift, an empty coffee cup, and a playlist that made the darkness seem smaller. I remember the windshield wipers cutting the night in regular beats like a metronome. Then, suddenly, I noticed a light in my rearview mirror that shouldn't have been there. At first, I thought it was a truck, one of those big rigs that crawl the interstate no matter what the weather says. The car behind me kept its distance, and the rain blurred everything into neon streaks. But the light never changed lanes. It stayed exactly behind me, not 2 cars back, not on the shoulder, right behind me. When I turned onto the 2-lane road that led to my neighborhood, the light followed every swerve, every red light, every slow curve. If I sped up, it matched me. If I slowed, it slowed to the same breath. I remember thinking the obvious. Same car, same driver, maybe some idiot getting home at the same time. I blinked against the rain and told myself the road was full of idiots. But parking lot empties, slow turns, a 4-way stop. The other car made the same choices, as if it couldn't take its eyes off mine. It didn't pass. It didn't signal. It merely followed. When I pulled into my driveway, the light in the mirror stayed. My house is nothing special, a small split level in a sleepy town, a mailbox that leans a little to the left, a porch light that stutters like it's on its last life. The neighbor's house was dark. There were no other cars. The dashboard clock read 1:27 a.m. I clicked off my engine, and in the silence that came after the rain's drum, I heard the other car's engine die, too. The light in my mirror went black. I eased the driver's door open, and the cold rain followed me in a straight line across the seat. I shut the door, locked it, and the house felt smaller than it had all night, like the rain had squeezed it down. I watched the driveway through the kitchen window while my hands fumbled for the deadbolt. For a while, there was nothing but the rain and the reflection of my own kitchen light. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the reflection. A dark shape stood where my car was parked, between my headlights and the mailbox. I waited for it to move again. It stepped closer, though I couldn't see its feet. It was just a silhouette. It tilted its head like it was listening. I tell you this because I want you to know I wasn't immediately brave. I did what most people do when the world feels off. I rationalized. People get weird in storms. Someone could be looking for shelter, a lost driver, a priest late for a funeral. I made up reasons while I dialed Megan, my best friend from high school who still answered at weird hours. "Hey," I whispered, "do you mind staying on the phone? I'm home, but something feels wrong." "You're being dramatic," she said without missing a beat. "You okay? Did you see?" "Someone in my driveway," I said, "by the car, standing there." There was a pause, then a soft exhale. "Lock your doors," she told me. "Don't go outside. Call the cops if you have to. Don't be a hero." I heard the flashlight buzz when she switched it on. though I haven't seen her light since college. She told me to keep an eye on the porch camera, but I don't have one. I told her I would go check the front door window. She laughed at me twice, once for the word check, and once for my trembling voice. I laughed back, like you're supposed to make it normal. The porch light flicked on when I pressed the switch, because of course it did, and a wet handprint fogged the glass from the outside. For a second, I let myself believe that someone had leaned their forehead to the glass and been frightened enough to smear a print there. Then I saw the runnel of water on the paint, like rain had traced a path from the roof to the screen. The print wasn't a full hand. It was long fingers spread in a too-wide fan, like a glove someone had left on a radiator. It wasn't a normal handprint. I texted a photo to Megan, adding the words, "This is exactly what I'm trying to avoid. Creep me out." She sent back 3 little words. "Stay inside, please." I stayed. The first few nights after that were weird in the benign ways. Missing keys. A bowl moved from the table to the couch. The TV turned to a channel I didn't remember selecting. I blamed forgetfulness. I blamed lack of sleep. I blamed the hour I had spent with my head under the running water at the gas station sink, while a cackling attendant told me that the weather had taken out power 2 towns over. I told myself my brain was tired, that my memory was a sieve. But the rain came again, and with it, the feeling that the world had a wet mouth. On the 3rd rainy night, after I saw the silhouette, a video arrived to my phone from an unknown number. The file was small, grainy, taken from a distance. It was of my driveway. It showed my tail lights as I pulled in. It showed the silhouette standing near the mailbox in exactly the same pose I'd seen in the reflection. Then the camera angle changed, as if whoever filmed it had crept closer. The figure stepped forward. The rain made the light smear across the screen. I watched me exit the car and disappear. Then, in a moment that cinched cold into my spine, the video showed the front door from inside, a shadow moving into frame, and a hand, long and wet, reaching toward the knob. I bolted from my kitchen to the door, phone in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I knocked over a chair on my way to the hall. The front door was locked. The deadbolt had not been touched. There were no wet prints on the doormat. There was nothing on the porch except for the rain. The timestamp on the video matched the time I had arrived home. Whoever had sent it had been watching me. Whoever had filmed it had been close enough to see the tiny glint on my key. I called the number back. It was disconnected. I texted, the text failed. Megan's calls came through. The local police line was a recording because the storm had knocked their dispatcher into a generator. They told me, as sympathetically as they could, to call 911 if the situation escalated. So I did what a lot of people do when fear is complicated by boredom and curiosity. I opened an online forum and wrote about it. I used a throwaway account and typed fast, fingers tinged with a thrill that felt like shame, even as I typed. Something's following me in the rain. Not a car, something. Videos sent anonymously, handprints, anyone else. Underneath the throwaway account's post, someone responded with a single line: "Don't go in the water." It was an odd response, so I replied, asking what they meant. The account that answered had one post, no followers, an avatar of static. The reply sent in all caps: "When the rain is as heavy as this, they can cross the glass. They come through reflections. They don't like being called by light." I remember my fingers hovering over the keyboard then. It felt like a joke someone told in the dark. People say things to spook strangers, but I couldn't make myself log off. Instead, I messaged back, courteous and sarcastic, and the account didn't reply. The thread moved on. People posted about their own storm tailies and driving horror. One person linked to a local news archive from years earlier, a story about a hitchhiker who vanished on Highway 17 after a sudden downpour. The article used the word hypothermia in the second paragraph and suggested foul play later. The photos were old and grainy, but the subject's face had the same eyes, dark, too attentive, like an animal that watches people more than it watches the road. The more I tried to rationalize, the less sense anything made. I stayed awake until dawn some nights, watching the rain, listening to the house settle. Once, in the long blue of morning, I found muddy footprints on my porch that started at the mailbox and ended right at the edge of the welcome mat, then vanished. There were no scuffs on the wood. The print's size and shape were wrong for any human shoe I had ever seen long toes. A gap between toe and heel, like the print, belonged to someone standing on their tippy toes. I told myself it was kids playing a trick. I told myself the town had a rat problem, and those were raccoon prints. I told myself anything but the truth, which was that something had learned my house's layout faster than I'd learned it, and that it liked leaving signature marks. The next twist came from footage at work. I work nights at a hospital lab. We handle blood samples and paperwork and easy jokes when the fluorescent lights make everyone look hungover. The security cameras there are old and middleware laggy, but they still tell the truth more often than the human memory does. One morning, my manager, Aaron, walked me into the break room with a USB stick in his hand and a face like he'd swallowed something sour. "My daughter posted this," he said. "She said she saw you on CCTV leaving at one time and then coming back inside later in the same 10-minute span. She thinks it's a glitch." I watched the footage at full screen. It showed me coat buttoned, hood up, coffee in hand, walking through the back door at 2:03 a.m. The timestamp flicked. At 2:12 a.m., the same camera showed me again, standing by the exit, soaking wet though my jacket was dry when I changed. My hair clung to my forehead, and my eyes looked like I hadn't slept in days. For those 9 minutes, the footage showed no one else. No car pulled into the employee lot. No one with an umbrella. There was no door opening other than my own. "What did you do?" Aaron asked me quietly. "Is this a joke?" "I didn't leave," I said. "I hadn't. I'd wrung out, washed my hands, and sat in the break room scrolling the news. The footage loop showed me again at 2:19, standing near the corridor that led to the stairwell. This time, though, there was a shape behind me in the shadow where the hallway light didn't reach. It wasn't clear. It was just a smear of darker pixels. But if you paused the frame and squinted, the smear had a head and long fingers. Maybe someone is messing with security, Aaron offered. He looked desperate for an explanation he could stand with his hands. We can ask it to check the logs. It checked. Their logs said the camera was fine, no edits. The metadata on the saved clip wasn't corrupted. Everything was apparently normal, except the feed kept showing me doing things I couldn't explain. At home, things crept into the kind of paranoia that makes you trust the little mechanism of your life less. Photographs began to betray me. Pictures of my sister and me at a barbecue suddenly had a dark figure standing behind us in the reflection of the grill. At first, I thought it was someone in a hood capturing their own reflection in the chrome. Then, I noticed the figure didn't match the angle of the camera. It looked at me directly like it was reading the photo. I ran a finger along the glossy paper like I could erase it. Twist after twist. The thing doesn't do big grand gestures. It does small wrongs that gnaw. A voicemail of static that plays my mother's voice calling me by the childhood nickname she hasn't used since I was 5. A grocery list crossed in handwriting that looks like mine until I hold it to the light and see letters looped abnormally. My reflection in the shower looks like it hesitates half a second longer than I do. The microwave clock gains a minute overnight. The world feels like a puzzle where one piece keeps swapping with the wrong one. On the 7th rainy night, I set up a cheap motion camera in my living room. I told myself it wasn't bravery. It was data. It was practical. I plugged it in, aimed it at the front window, and left the porch light off. I told Megan I had to sleep with the TV on to keep from thinking too hard. She drove over anyway and slept with her shoes on in the guest room like she did the last time our power had flickered out. She carried a knife in her boot, which felt ridiculous until it didn't. She didn't laugh when I told her that the handprints had returned. "You need to leave town," she said around her toothy grin, which disappears when she gets serious. "Take a road trip. Go somewhere dry." She left in the morning with the sky a pale, tired gray. She hugged me like people hug themselves the night before a surgery. I watched the taillights until they disappeared. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I had guests. I told myself 1,000 small apologies I could have said differently. That night, the rain began earlier than predicted. It was a curtain of water so thick I couldn't see the mailbox across the street. I sat on the couch with my knees tucked up like a child, the cheap camera humming softly behind the mantel. The TV played a documentary about storms and how they change people's perception. In the flicker of the picture, the living room looked normal lamp, rug, the chipped paint on the windowsill where I'd tried to fix a draft. At 2:06 a.m., my phone vibrated against the coffee table. A text from an unknown number. "Are you watching?" I froze. froze. I didn't respond. My thumb hovered. Then the front window flashed with lightning. The world brightened like someone had turned on a massive studio light. In that light, I saw something cross the porch. The motion camera captured it as a smear of wet darkness. Then the living room did something that made my throat close like a fist. My reflection in the TV, the one from the documentary, blinked when I did not. I stood up wrong. My knees were too loud against the coffee table. The sound made me feel like I was the only thing acknowledging gravity. The apartment seemed to contract. My breath came out as white smoke. The front door was closed. The camera was humming. The rain sounded like applause on the roof. Then, casually, the sound of the deadbolt turning came from the hallway. I didn't fumble for the knife. I didn't put on shoes. I walked because walking felt like the only honest action I could take. My hand hovered over the deadbolt as if I could sense the temperature of the metal and measure danger by it. The knob turned slowly. The door opened an inch, and a wet hand slid under the edge of the door like a question mark. The fingers were too long. The knuckles were the color of old pennies. They left a trailing string of water on the wood. The hand withdrew. The door closed. I looked down at the threshold, then back at the hallway. There was nothing to see, but my phone buzzed again. It was a video from the same unknown number. The clip was shaky and close. It was a video taken from behind the curtain where the neighbor stores their old lawn furniture. The camera lens was wet with rain. The footage showed my door from the outside. It showed the narrow gap. It showed the wet hand inserting itself into a small slot and turning the inside lock. It zoomed in. The hand's fingers flexed like it was testing the ribs of the deadbolt. The video came closer. A pulse in the frame. A face, inches from the peephole, pressed to the male slot, as if it had no need to look through glass. The face was blank when the camera shivered and the clip ended. I dropped my phone. It hit the rug and skidded, and the case cracked like everything in the house had been promised a little betrayal. I called the police that time. They came slow because there were ditches to tend to and trees to clear, and because in small towns, storms call a million emergencies to the same line. The officer who arrived had a tired stare. He took my statement and wrote slowly on a pad. He didn't see the wet prints on my porch because my neighbor hadn't called about them yet. He didn't see the dark figure in the front window because I hadn't asked him to look for it. I told him about the videos, about the camera, about the deadbolt. He suggested I sleep at Megan's. I can't tonight, I told him. I have to watch the house. He put his hand on my shoulder the way adults do when they want to close the conversation. I'll put a ride-by in, he said. If you get another video, save it. Give it to us. I wished I had saved every strange memory like a video clip, like a file on a hard drive. But human memory doesn't always cooperate. It edits and omits and lies. It puts lipstick on small things and calls them lipstick. I remember packing the floor. I remember the camera's red light blinking. remember the rain like a drumbeat that counted down time. I remember hearing someone hum through the walls with a voice that sounded exactly like mine, but deeper and older. The way a field sounds different when you stand in it under a full moon. There was a knock on the door at 3:02 a.m. 3 light raps in quick succession, as if the knocker had been rehearsing for a play. I opened the door. There was no one there. The porch was empty. The sound I thought I had heard was the rain. The officer who had promised a ride-by was parked down the street. He waved, headlights cutting through the water like someone taking a photograph. I waved back. He didn't see me wave the second time. He had turned his back. When I turned back to the door, the welcome mat had been flipped over. On the ground where it had been facing up, a message had been written in a child's hand, with a finger smeared in something that could have been mud or something worse. It said, "I remember." My throat closed. I remembered then a night I had buried in the dark of my own memory. I had been 19, reckless, and drunk on the confidence of being young. I had been driving a different car on a different road with an old friend, heading home from a party we weren't supposed to be at. The rain came in sheets. A figure darted across the road like an animal. I braked. The tires screamed. I remember the sick, dull thud. I remember thinking I'd hit a deer. I remember the light. I remember pulling over and seeing a person on their knees in the mud. Their hair clung to their face like black wet paint. They held up a hand, and I saw the gap in their fingers, long and wet. Fear made me do the most human things. I fled. I left the scene. I called my friend and lied about flat tires. I told myself, and anyone who would listen later, that we'd never seen anything. I dropped the memory into a hole and walked away. The thing in my doorway that night wasn't supernatural because I wanted it to be, or because I believed in monsters. It was supernatural because it had found a name, and the name was mine. It knew the night I'd left. It knew I had walked away. That realization swung the story into something that felt beyond petty mischief. The following months stitched themselves into one continuous interrogation. I learned that the rain remembers what we leave in it. I learned that someone, something, could enter through the slit of a lock and use our reflections like open doors. I learned that the person I had once decided to abandon wasn't only a memory. They were a presence shaped by moisture and the weight of being forgotten. I tried to make amends in small, clumsy ways. I went to the local police and admitted what I had done that night 19 years ago. I told them everything, the pulley of fear, the guilt that tasted like pennies on my tongue. The detective who took my statement had a face like a bad photograph. He told me the case was closed. No body had ever been found. No one had ever been listed missing on a night that matched the weather. He took my name and said they would look into records. He avoided my eyes. That evening, when I returned home, the kitchen light was on. A single note sat in the middle of my counter, written on a napkin, ironically from the diner, where I'd spent too many nights washing coffee mugs. It read, "Thank you for REMEMBRING." relief, and horror at once. I felt like someone had put a hand on my shoulder and rotated my spine back into the place it had been 20 years ago. I felt forgiven and watched. I didn't know how to hold both at once. After that, the incidents simplified. They weren't small wrongs anymore. They were corrections. My mail came 3 days late, soaked and rearranged. My childhood photos were rearranged so that in every group shot, the person I had left crouched just behind my shoulder, patient and still. Once, I woke to the smell of gasoline in my living room, the hint of someone else's cigarette smoke in my hair, an old man's cigarettes from a decade before I'd ever lit one. I found my car keys beneath the couch, wrapped in twigs. Someone had been in my house while I slept, leaving a map of the yard in the mud on my floor. The big moment, the one that turned a series of uncanny pranks into a confrontation, happened on a night so dark the power only flickered when the rain fell so hard it hit the world. The camera I'd set up in the living room caught the whole thing. I watched the clip on my laptop until my eyes burned. The footage showed me sitting on the couch with my hands clasped. The lights flickered. The window showed a black wall of rain. Then the figure walked past the porch, head lowered. Its face was wet and hair plastered. It looked like something that has forgotten how to be human. It stepped up to the door and stopped. The locked deadbolt clicked. I watched the figure raise its hand. It didn't reach for the knob. It reached for the reflection in the glass. And when it touched the glass, the thing's outline shivered like someone shaking a curtain. The TV reflection caught it first. The face in the reflection didn't match the face outside the window. It matched mine. I sat up, and the figure behind the glass sat up too, mirroring me with the wrong sync. For the first time, I felt the old woman's grief of knocking on a locked door and not hearing a voice back. The figure spoke without moving its mouth. 3 quiet syllables in a baritone that filled the living room and shook the lamp. Why did you leave me? It told me the story I'd buried. The stumble on the roadside, the rain-wet palm upturned to ask for help, the look in its eyes when I turned away. It told it with the patience of someone rehearsing a long monologue that had no audience. Every word was small and precise. It knew every excuse I'd given myself in the years since. The speed of the car, the state of my head, the deadline I had to meet, the friends I needed to join, the fear that someone would blame us. It repeated them like stones dropped into a well, and each splash echoed up with the name of the person I'd been. It wanted to know why. I said things then that felt like apologies, and nothing like them. I named things that had never been named aloud. I cried, which is a sound I would later be embarrassed by. I said I was sorry, and meant it in the fractured way humans do when they grope for absolution. The figure leaned its forehead to the glass. A drop of water traced down its face and landed on the inside of the pane. The figure's fingers splayed on the outside and matched mine on the inside, each finger opposite the other, like someone plastered to glass trying to meet a twin. Then figure smiled. It moved away, leaving a damp fog that wrote letters on the window that smudged into the shape of words. The words spelled out a date. I recognized it immediately. The date I remembered driving home and leaving that body in the mud. The thing wrote with the patience of a calendar and the cruelty of a judge. "You remember now," it said. "You remember enough." Then the door opened because I had unlocked it without meaning to. I had leaned forward, and my hand had actually found the bolt and turned it. It took me a moment to realize I had been the one to let myself be opened. The figure stepped through the doorway and onto the threshold. Where a person should have had a chest and clothing, this thing had a slick, dark film that clung and ran. It had the season's smell, rain and algae and old coins. When it walked, the floor made no sound. The thing moved like someone learning to be quiet after a lifetime of being loud. We spoke then, but not in words you could write down and still have meaning. We spoke in exchanges of memory. It showed me what it had been: a hitchhiker, a teenager, a person with a grade school dream, and a name I couldn't have helped but forget. It showed me the last look it gave me when I drove away. A look that fit pain like a coat fits shoulders. I don't know how long the conversation lasted. It felt like the length of an ocean. At some point, the thing lifted its head and said, "I followed the rain because it knows where you are." Rain remembers people. Rain holds on to what you leave in the dark. I promised a lot of things I don't deserve. I promised to look, to help, to tell the story until it didn't hurt. I promised to call the old detective and stand down on the case. I promised to plant a little garden in a place no one would see. I promised to remember. It listened like someone deciding whether to accept an apology. Then it stepped to the window and pressed its face to the glass. For the first time since that night, the face looked younger, softer. The long fingers splayed, and the hand smudged the glass with a message that fogged and then cleared to read. Forgiven. Forgiveness is a small, monstrous thing. It is not tidy. It does not tidy up the past and hand you a receipt. It simply says you can carry the weight together now instead of alone. The thing backed away. It turned its head as if listening for something behind it. I followed its gaze and saw, in the reflection of the TV and the window, dozens of other shadows standing at the edge of my porch in the rain. Not all the same shape, not all human. They watched like a congregation. Then one by one, they stepped back into the night and were swallowed by the rain. After that night, the video stopped. The calls stopped. The handprints dried up. My mail came on time. The mud on the welcome mat was just that mud. The world resembled itself again in the way the cicadas resemble themselves in summer. The same sound, but easier to ignore. People ask me now if I'm better. I say I am, because it's the only thing that sounds like healing. But the truth is I check my rearview mirror every time I park, even when it isn't raining. I find myself refusing to drive on certain back roads, especially when the forecast is, for for anything more than a drizzle. I keep a list in a drawer of the people I owe apologies to, names I read like a rosary. I call my sister more often. I have let help in where before I might have turned away. And there's one last thing I want to tell you, because if the thing followed me, maybe it can follow you. When it left, when it walked back into the rain and the others followed, it turned once and looked directly at me. It tapped on the glass from the outside with the lightest fingernail. The sound was small, like the knock of someone polite, and it matched the tap in my chest. Then it whispered a line I will never forget. Don't drive past them when the sky is falling again. The rain keeps a list. A month later, it rained like the world was trying to wash its mistakes away. I thought I had forgiven myself enough to sleep through it. I had turned the radio up. I had told myself stories about rain being water and nothing more. At 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed, a video from an unknown number. I did not click it at first. I sat up and watched the messages pile. Are you watching? You could still fix it. Do you remember? Don't be afraid to stop. I have the video saved in a folder I don't open. If you ask me why, I'll say it's evidence. I'll say I want to keep it in case the police need it. But really, I keep it because I want to remember what justice looked like that night. Not as a clean cinematic redemption, but as a damp, patient thing that will wait in the rain for you to come home and do the small work. If you're listening to this because you like a good story and the hair on your neck just stood up, do one simple thing. When you see someone on the side of the road in the rain, stop. Open your door. Offer a towel. Make the world slightly less easy to walk away from. Because rain remembers what you leave in it. And if it remembers you, it will find a way to make you remember back.